Okay, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to our webinar on Pandemic, a Perspective on Special Education. This session is part of the EduSpeak series at the School of Education. My name is Mehreen Noon, and I will be moderating the session today. For this very important topic, our panelists are outstanding individuals who have dedicated their lives to ensuring equity and excellence for students with special needs. Our focus will be on their individual experiences in schools and also how they transitioned to online teaching during the pandemic. Let me begin by introducing the panelists to you. Samreena Anwar, currently serving as head of Oasis School for Autism. She's the author of a series of related curriculum books for Oxford University Press. Fluent in implementing Teach and CERTS, both these programs are to communicate, teach, and emotionally regulate autistic children. She also develops individualized targeted programs for autism. Richard Geary, founder and director of Family Educational Services Foundation, a nonprofit operating in Pakistan for over 3 decades. Most importantly, FESF has developed the Deaf Reach program, which provides academic education and skills training for deaf students. The organization won the Global 2018 WISE Award for Education. Nabila Chaudhry, now CEO at the Rising Sun. She is a psychologist, a special needs educationist. Working for 2 decades, she's extremely passionate about her work with children and adults with special needs. She writes for renowned newspapers and uses online platforms to highlight special ed. Dr. Rabia Malik. Dr. Rabia Malik brings in the much needed academic perspective to this conversation. CEO, Research Fellow at Ideas Pakistan. She has a doctorate in education policy analysis from University of Cambridge. Rabia has co-authored a paper on Our Children with Disabilities in School and Learning, evidence from a household survey in rural Punjab, Pakistan. Thank you so much, panelists, for being part of this session, for taking time out from your very busy schedules to help us understand this really important topic. We also have with us Interim Dean of SOE, Dr. Faisal Bari. Dr. Bari का एक special interest है in this topic, and he has also taught inclusive education with Dr. Tamim to our MPhil students. आप सबका बहुत शुक्रिया and welcome. The audience is of course welcome to type in their questions, लेकिन ये जरूर कीजिएगा कि जिस पैनलिस्ट से पूछना हो उनका नाम लिखिएगा, ठीक है? So Samreena, मैं आपसे session शुरू करूंगी. Samreena, can you give us a background on your experience at Oasis and your involvement with autistic children?
Okay,
Over to you, Samreena.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mehreen. And I think this is an excellent effort. I would really like to appreciate it because we have been trying our level best to spread awareness. 11 years back, when we planned and incepted Oasis, a school for autism, there was no school for autism in Pakistan. So before we started, we did a lot of research, whereas world over, autism had to be separate from other needs. And the one thing that I've learned in my first roller coaster ride of learning about special needs, which actually did not begin 11 years back, which began when I was working with mainstream. I have 32 years in education. So when I was working in a mainstream school, we took some exceptional children, blind children who were different. And living in a society, I am not just saying our society, but this world, where you have a difference, whether it is a difference in your state of mind where you think differently, or it is a difference, physical difference, which I myself have experienced because I had polio when I was 2 years old. So being different and growing up in this society taught me to become a fighter. And now I feel I've anchored my life with these children and I know what their and their families' battles are. So we realized that autism is not even understood what it is in Pakistan. So taking that one core difference and realizing that there's nothing normal or abnormal, whereas the cliched words which even Punjab University was using, mentally retarded, abnormal children, we had to fight a battle that we talked to their heads and told them from now on it's different children and typical children. So it's going to be a challenge for us. It's not special needs for them. It's for us to understand that how children need something differently. So the first year of the inception of Oasis was about understanding how we are going to introduce interventions. That 1 year, the building was being constructed, but there were people around who gave us places. We took training. We called people from our major liaison was with UK and America. So the 2 interventions that we are using are the most successful interventions in the world right now, Teach and CERTS. The basic thing is that these children have difficulty in communicating in our way. They communicate with visuals. So if we understand them, we understand how to communicate with them, things become completely different. So OSS gave them a platform, whereas when you start something, there are times and there are people that you do find thinking that it might be a very uphill task. We found an architect who had done her majors in autism construction from Canada. So the school building, small in itself, but was planned and designed and built for autistic children. In this whole ride, I really understood what circular teaching is. That where you are trying to teach a child, but the child becomes your teacher too. So we've learned in this experience what exactly every child needs. You see, there are other challenges which children face. And usually there are some streaks and some things that can be handled in the same way with most of the children. Whereas in autism, it's such a huge spectrum that every child is an individual entity. Their demands, their needs, and their mode of communication is different. So if we start understanding them, we cannot have a run-of-the-mill curriculum. We have to prepare an individual intervention plan for every child. So that means the needs of that child are what we need to learn. So I wouldn't say that they are special needs children. I would rather say that we have to change our perspective, our way of thinking, and we cannot put them in a mold and prepare very small little cupcakes for everyone. No, it has to be so different. And it is so interesting when we come to explain things and show you a few things that probably would give you a better understanding of what autism is from today. They
Thank
are
you so much.
exceptionally bright.
Thank you,
thank
Samrina.
Mary, you have to remind me to stop.
No, I appreciate the way you put things across. और इतना अच्छी तरह आपने कहा है कि it's not the children, it's us that we have to learn how to adapt to what they're doing. So it's not them, it's us. बहुत अच्छी तरह. Thank you so much for this, Samrina. I'd like to quickly bring in Richard, if I may. Richard, you arrived in Pakistan in the late 80s and have been there, you've been here since then. आप उर्दू भी इतनी अच्छी बोलते हैं, so it's so comfortable to have a bilingual session with you. And can you please just kind of share a little bit about your experiences and difficulties for deaf students when you came to Pakistan, and then how Deaf Reach was instrumental in changing that paradigm? Over to you, Richard.
He's on mute.
Richard, आप mute पे हैं?
Thank you, Marine. I'll keep in English for now. Urdu meri achi nahi hai to. Let's stick with the English part for myself.
Zarur.
Thank you. And actually, when we talk about deaf children, language acquisition is the main challenge. And I very much relate because I've had a very difficult time acquiring Urdu in all my years here. So it gives me a lot of compassion. My wife and I are parents of a deaf child. And when we came to Pakistan in the late 80s, actually we were visiting and assisting on a project that some friends of ours were doing in the development sector. And because our son was deaf, we were looking for some educational pathway for him. And sadly, it was very difficult to find anything of quality. When we talk about the challenges of deaf education in Pakistan, and this is not only for Pakistan, but I think all countries basically in the global south, what we would call developing countries, where programs for children with disabilities, in my field, particularly with deaf children, not to say they're non-existent, but they're not very strong. There's just a huge gap there. For example, the British Council has identified that roughly out of Pakistan's 220 million population, upwards of 13 to 15% have some disabilities. That's a huge number. And in general, persons with disabilities are a very underserved, marginalized community. And when we talk about deaf children in particular, again, there are no really great stats in Pakistan, but we've estimated there's over 1 million deaf children of school age, yet hardly 5% have access to education. So there's this huge gap that's there. And keep in mind, the only schools for the deaf that do exist are in the main urban centers, but 70% of the country lives in the rural areas. And outside of government schools, which don't function all that well, there really are no facilities for deaf children. So back to our small beginnings, my wife and I saw this and we said, let's do something, whatever's in our power. A friend of ours, we're in Karachi, and a friend of ours had donated a small office space in Sadr. And we started a small basic tuition center there for deaf teenagers. We had about 15 to 20 young men and women that were coming on a daily basis. We were teaching them basic literacy skills, helping them find employment. And from those small beginnings, this program sort of grew. We had parents come to us, "Oh, hamare bache def kya kare?" I said, fine, bring them over, let's do something. And we started our first primary class of children. Again, we had about a dozen small children from Baldia town who were coming on a daily basis. And from those small beginnings, this project grew to where we now have 7 full-time schools operating in 7 different cities, ranging from KG all the way up through a college program. And I'm very proud to say that 2 years ago, we initiated a BA program for higher education for deaf students, one of the few in the country. So we've had a lot of challenges along the way, as you can imagine. In a sense, one of our key challenges was ensuring that the communities that we were reaching out to were accepting of us. Our model was not just to focus on the urban areas, but we reached out into rural Sindh to start. We opened a school in Sakkar and in Nawab Shah, in Hyderabad. And our biggest challenge was to ensure that we had engagement with the parents. That was always a core to our program, to have our parents involved and trained. And we would actually bring the parents in on the weekends. We would send our vans to collect them and bring them, give them a healthy snack and a 2-hour sign language class. And we've had great success with that. And this program continues to this day. 2 times a month on Saturdays, we bring the parents in every campus. They learn sign language. They learn to communicate with their children. And as the ripple effect, they also gain literacy skills. I think 90% plus of the families our children come from are very low education, low income backgrounds, from small gowns and Kachiabadi areas here in the city. So it's been very exciting to see the parents involved with their kids and learning along with them.
Thank you, Richard, for this personal insight. Then how did you manage to help your son, because he didn't have any support system in the country? So what exactly did you do to kind of support him? Was he part of this program that you started?
He was a teenager, of course, at that time. And as in a way, I learned to be a teacher through working with him. My wife and I, we basically created our own home program whereby we could tutor him. And he was very involved and engaged in setting up this center initially with us. It was quite a learning process and challenging at times, but I think the things that we learned in the process ultimately equipped us to be able to help others. And that's why at the heart of our program was always that factor of involving the parents and helping them understand, because it's quite discouraging at first, for parents when they find they have a child who has some disability. They don't always know how to deal with it. They don't have access to information. they don't always get the right kind of guidance.
Sure.
And that can be very traumatic in many families, sadly. And then the children are the ones who suffer because they're often ostracized. Particularly here in Pakistan, there's a lot of antiquated mindsets about things like this. So
yeah, so true. Thank you so much for
Sure.
this. We'll turn to Dr. Malik now. Dr. Malik, how did your research interest in this area begin? I've read your paper and it highlights the need for credible data on children with special needs. You also write about how important it is to include these specially abled children in the Sustainable Development Goals. You write about access to learning opportunities. And if you could just shed a little bit of light on the government's role for these initiatives so far. So Dr. Malik.
Thank you very much, Mehreen, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this esteemed panel. I'm very happy to actually just give my time over to the fascinating sort of experiences that are coming from the implementers. It's so wonderful to be able to hear that. So essentially, Mehreen, the paper came out of a research that actually was looking at marginalization. So to link to a point that Richard was trying to make, children with disabilities represent a cohort of a broader cohort of marginalized children, and in some ways they're the most marginalized and the most invisible also. It's taken a very long time and efforts of the kinds of people that are on the panel today to raise voices and to bring attention to the lives and the stories of the children that are suffering from disabilities and difficulties. So one of the things you speak about, the need for credible data. This is absolutely true. So there's a combination of factors that I think contributes to the underreporting. One, the stigma that is associated with reporting that there is difficulty, but also I think it's taken a lot of time for sensitive and effective tools to be developed to be able to ask about difficulty. So it's only very recently, I think, that there are questions that have been developed that don't even use the term disability in order to avoid the stigma around this term and everything that it carries with it. So to ask about difficulties that children are facing, to operationalize what type of physical difficulties that may be, linking it to perhaps how far they can walk, what are the kinds of things they can do, whether they can see with or without glasses, has really helped sort of very recently start generating data that have allowed the kinds of numbers that are mentioned now, up to 15% by some. In our survey, it was up to 11% of children with severe disability or some form of difficulty in the population. So the initial census that used to happen in Pakistan, even though it had the question, it was asked in a very crude fashion. And so I think it contributed to these numbers, just not to the invisibility of the numbers. Now, what the lack of data, I think, does is it hampers not only the lack of data, but also the lack of narratives and stories, which I think are so important to tell. It hampers understanding. It sort of divides, it widens the divides between people. And what we don't understand, we're often unable to help or even plan for or cater to. So what the government, I think, first of all, in the way that the government can be helped is by organizations that are developing these tools to work with not only non-governmental organizations, but also government departments to run surveys that can help identify children with difficulties, not only those that are out of school, because the majority of them tend to be those that are in special schools. But one of the things that our paper found, actually, in the way that we conducted the survey and designed it, there are lots of children with difficulty in mainstream government and private schools as well. So being able to have tools that identify, that can be sort of spread widely across society, and that can help identify children in a disaggregated fashion with differences in type and severity of difficulties, I think is very important. What I was very heartened to read in the policy that the Punjab government has taken out is that they recognize the paradigm shift away from a medical model to a systemic model. So I think just even the fact, it may just be that it's on paper, and a lot of work needs to be done to get the meaning of this shift to people in our society. And it links to the point that I think Samrina was making, in that it's not the children. The fault doesn't lie with them. It lies with the system that is unable to support them. So how do we shift this gaze? And if the government can start shifting this gaze and thinking about the kinds of support they need to provide, including counting these children, including training teachers, including providing transport and other support that's required, including funding for organizations that are working with special needs, involving them in dialogues that inform this policy. I think all of that is what can be done to make these children visible. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Rabia. Beautifully articulated and very helpful for this conversation. I'll bring in Nabila now. Nabila, आप Rising Sun में बहुत passionately काम कर रही हैं, और मुझे ये भी पता है कि आप adults के साथ भी कर रही हैं और छोटे बच्चों के साथ भी कर रही हैं. तो थोड़ा सा मुझे अपना बैकग्राउंड बताइए और ये बताइए कि आपने अपने आप को ट्रेन किया या मिस्टर एंड मिसेस तवाब ने आपको ट्रेन किया? How did you start this initiative?
Assalamu alaikum. It's really a pleasure to be here among such eminent panelists. I'm sorry I'm having some problems with my video, so you might not be able to see me, but I hope that you're hearing me well.
Yes, Nabila, thank you. No worries. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'll start by introducing my organization. I'm from Rising Sun Education and Welfare Society, and it's working for children and adults with special needs since '84. Basically, the founders, Dr. Abdul Tawab Khan and Mrs. Parveen Tawab, they started Rising Sun as a daycare center from the dining room of their house back in '84 for 2 children with Down syndrome. And gradually it grew into an NGO, and now we're running different projects catering to I can say that we try to cover the lifespan of a child with special needs. We start with early intervention programs where children from birth to 3 years can enroll, and we basically work on the early stimulation, and we try to keep their milestones as near to normal as possible. Then we have a day school, obviously. We provide all the therapies, and we basically focus on developing life skills and academic. Definitely, if a child has a capability, it should be explored, and we should try to crystallize the fluid ability that the child has. So we have formal academic coaching from children birthed from school age, starting from 3 years to 12. And then we, for children having intellectual impairment, we have a specialized program that we transit this academic activity to functional academics and pre-vocational skills. Now we are
थोड़ा सा अपनी इन्वॉल्वमेंट का जिक्र करेंगी, एंड वील कम टू ऑल दीज क्वेश्चंस लेटर, कि आपने कैसे ज्वाइन किया, और आप आज सीईओ हैं माशाल्लाह, तो ये उसका थोड़ा सा अपनी जर्नी का बताइए.
अच्छा, मेरा ख्याल है वो आपने जहाँ कहीं पहुंचना होता है ना, अल्लाह ताला आपको पकड़ के वहां तक ले जाए. टू बी वेरी ऑनेस्ट, मैंने कभी नहीं सोचा था दैट आई विल बी वर्किंग इन स्पेशल एजुकेशन. आई वाज डूइंग माय मास्टर्स इन साइकोलॉजी, और वो खत्म होने वाला था. लाहौर कॉलेज फॉर वुमेन यूनिवर्सिटी में एक ऐड लगा कि एक इंस्टीट्यूशन है जहाँ पर एक सीट जो है वो वेकेंट है साइकोलॉजिस्ट की. आई जस्ट वेंट देयर, और वहाँ पे जो फाउंडर्स थे, आंटी और अंकल हम उनको कहते हैं, डॉक्टर अब्दुल तवाब खान एंड मिसेस परवीन, वो इतना अच्छा एनवायरनमेंट लगा. और वंस आई स्टार्टेड वर्किंग, I teach special speech therapist, then psychologist, principal. इतनी प्यारी दुनिया है, ये आपको प्योरीफाई कर देते हैं. तो जब once I joined, उसके बाद it
नबीला, आपकी आवाज चली गई है, लेकिन आपने इतनी अच्छी बात कही है, प्यारी दुनिया वाली, और आपकी डेडिकेशन तो बहुत ऑब्वियसली नजर आती है, क्योंकि मैं खुद भी गई हूँ राइजिंग सन. नबीला, आपको ऑडियो का इशू हो रहा है थोड़ा सा. कैन यू हियर अस?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
जी, आपकी बीच में आवाज थोड़ी सी कट गई थी नबीला, तो आप प्लीज कंटिन्यू. मेरा एक और सवाल था, मैं आपको बता दूं तो ताकि आपकी फ्लो ना इम्पैक्ट हो. ये जो आपकी इंस्टीट्यूट है, 1000 बच्चा है इसमें, और माशाल्लाह ہر قسم کا ہے, ویژول امپیئرمنٹ ہے, انٹلیکچوئل ڈسیبلٹی ہے, سریبرل پالیسی ہے, آٹزم ڈس آرڈر ہے. تو مطلب کمال ایفرٹ ہے اور کمال ایکٹیویٹیز ہیں. لیکن آپ اس کو انڈیویجول اور ٹارگیٹڈ پروگرامس کو کیسے مینیج کرتے ہو؟ یو نو دس از اے ہیوج لوڈ, لاٹ آف ورک.
ایگزیکٹلی. میرا خیال ہے جتنے لوگ اسپیشل ایجوکیشن میں کام کر رہے ہیں وہ یہ انڈرسٹینڈ کرتے ہیں کہ ان بچوں کے لیے سوشلائزیشن بھی اتنا ہی امپورٹنٹ ہے جتنا انڈیویجولائزڈ ٹریننگ پلان یا اکیڈمک پلان ہونا ہے. بیسکلی اگر میں ورک فلو کا ایکسپلین کروں تو اس میں یہ ہوتا ہے کہ ایوری جب آپ اس کو اسیسمنٹ کے پروسیس سے گزارتے ہیں وہاں پہ آپ کے پاس پوری پروفائل آ جاتی ہے. اور انڈیویجولائزڈ پلان کے اندر سے پھر ہم کچھ ایکٹیویٹیز میں ڈالی جا سکتی ہیں. لائک سوشلائزیشن کے گولس تو اوبیسلی جب آپ سوشلائز کریں گے تو ہی اچیو کیے جا سکتے ہیں. لیکن جو بچے ایکیڈیمک گولس ہیں, ہر بچہ ایون ایک گروپ میں ہم جب گروپنگ کرتے ہیں مے بی دے آر نیئرلی آف سیم ابیلٹی لیول اور نیئرلی آف سیم فنکشنل لیول, لیکن ان کی ریکوائرمنٹس ڈفرینٹ ہوتی ہیں. اس لیے انڈیویجول اسیسمنٹ کے بعد کا انڈیویجولائز پلان کر کے ہم لوگ اتنا ڈیوائڈ کر لیتے ہیں کہ ایک گروپ میں دو ٹیچرز ہیں. ٹیچر focuses on individualized sessions and the teacher works more on the combined or group activities.
جی بہت شکریہ نبیلہ, thank you so much, and we will ask you some more questions later. Richard, if I could, you alluded towards the Pakistani sign language a little bit, so if you could kindly just talk to us about that and also a little bit about the training aspect for parents and for your staff on the Pakistani sign language.
Sure. Could I share my screen and take you through a little presentation while I talk? Would that help?
Please do. Please do. So while you're sharing your screen, Richard, ہمیں یہ بھی بتائیے گا کہ how did you transition to online during COVID-19? How did that impact you? اور آپ نے کوئی innovations کی during this time? Just a little bit about that as well.
Sorry, were you asking me that question?
No, I just said if you could also highlight how you managed to transition during COVID time.
I'm going to do that right now. Is my screen shared there?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So let me talk for just a minute about our Pakistan Digital Sign Language Learning Resources. Keeping in mind that sign language is the native language of deaf children, and sign language is not universal. You know, it's indigenous to every country. In many countries, it's very well documented, and there's resources, dictionaries, etc. In Pakistan, sadly, there's been very little documentation. There's been a few books over the many years that basically are out of print and not easy to find. We were able to take on this task and created the first ever digital sign language dictionary. This was in 2014. Now this is online at www.psl.org.pk, and it's available free of cost to the whole country. And there's 6,000 words in this dictionary, and I'll just give you a little example here. So you've got the sign, you've got the English and the Urdu voiceover. We created signs for academic terminologies. Keep in mind that sign language didn't have much of an academic sense to it because education for the deaf is somewhat of a recent phenomenon. So there was a lot of challenges. It took us about 3 years to create this dictionary, but we're super excited because it's been a great tool that's benefited the whole country, basically. It's a great tool to use also with children who aren't deaf but have other learning disabilities, such as autism, etc. But I'd like to share with you what we've done during COVID specifically, because that's kind of the focus of this discussion. And we were very challenged in a number of fronts because obviously schools were closed. And for deaf children, our kids thrive in this environment where they're able to communicate with their peers, with their teachers, because at home they're isolated. Their families don't know sign language that well. They might have some basic skills, but we were concerned about their deterioration of their language, as well as losing their educational pathway. So when COVID hit in March last year, realizing that schools would be closed for some time, we engaged our teachers and we decided we would create a distance learning program. And the goal here was to enable our deaf students to retain their language skills, stay current with their education. And our goal was to film in sign language all the curricular content for every grade in 4 key subjects, which was math, science, Urdu, and English. It was a task much bigger than we realized, and we're still in the midst of it as I speak right now. But we're very excited as to the results, and here's how we went about this. We set up a studio in-house in our school, in 2 of our campuses actually, and we started, our teachers developed lesson plans, they developed SLOs, and we started filming the content. We reached out to donors and we were able to sponsor a low-cost refurbished laptop for each one of our students across all 7 of our schools. Because keep in mind, these kids are not online. They live in Gaons, Kachiabadi areas that don't have internet access, and internet devices are too costly. So this was a low-cost solution whereby giving them a laptop like this, we could then deliver content on a monthly basis by the teacher visiting them or the parent coming with them to school and uploading it on their computer as we created month-to-month content. So our teachers all collaborated over those months working on creating the lesson plans, et cetera, and the worksheets, because the digital content was accompanied by a paper worksheets, which the kids could write on and return and get feedback. In fact, our students got engaged. We got a donation of a huge quantity of denim blue jeans from a textile company here. And so our students are very creative and they said, oh, we'll make laptop bags for all the laptops. And they did. And they did an amazing job. It took about 2 months, but they made about close to 1,500 laptop bags. And this was the finished result. And they're lovely. In fact, Duraz got excited, and so they're starting. They're giving us a link on Duraz where they can sell their laptop bags. So what we did then, as per our model of keeping parents engaged, and particularly if the kids were going to be working from home, they needed to have parental engagement. Otherwise, they would be very neglected. So we called all the parents in small groups, so where we could manage SOPs, to come, and we did our orientation, how to use the laptop, how to access the content, and provided then the equipment to the child, the device. And this was a learning experience for the parents. It was so fun to see because most parents had never seen a laptop or used a laptop before in their lives. They even weren't sure how to open it. It was interesting, but exciting. And so we had these orientation sessions, the parents engaged with their kids. And as you can see from the pictures here, they all went home with the device. And for the last many months, they've now been able to work at home while schools have been closed. Here's some interesting pictures. And what I'm excited about is that it's not just our kids that are learning, but their siblings, their families. They live in their bara khandans and they come together and they all gather around. So there's a ripple effect there. And they live in some of the most meager sort of situations. Some of them don't even have electricity. We had stories from parents who would cycle a half hour to the local store to charge the laptop and bring it back home so their child could do their work. I think this picture just captures it all. So it's been a successful program. The beauty of this also is that it met a short-term need in sense of keeping our kids their education relevant and ongoing right now. But for the long term, all this content that we developed and are still in the midst of developing will be up on a website and accessible countrywide for anyone to access, free of cost. So this will be, you know, any teacher that works with deaf children, any families with deaf children, any employers that hire deaf individuals that need access to language or, you know, vocabulary or whatever. I think this will be a repository that will serve many for many, many years to come. So that was our intervention, and what was a huge challenge turned into a really great opportunity to change.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This was wonderful, Richard. And it was really great to see the good work that Deaf Reach has done with these children. And during COVID, you've been extremely active. And this is probably a good time to mention as well that you're looking for volunteers to maybe come over and an educationist to come over and help them with your curriculum, correct? And in the process, they also end up learning a different language, which is PSL.
Yeah, we would love to have any LUM students, anyone for that matter, that was willing to contribute some hours in a week, in a month. They can work from home. We just need help in creating these classes, the lessons, the worksheets, etc. We can guide as long as we have some willing hands and minds.
Thank you, Richard. Makes a lot of sense. Samreena, बहुत मजा आया ये इनका PowerPoint देख के. अब आपकी तरफ मैं आती हूँ. समरीना, आपके बच्चों का एक certain schedule होता है, एक familiarity होती है, which is really important to them. And you mentioned them when you were introducing yourself. And you said that the same kind of environment is really important. So आपके लिए तो exceptionally challenging होगा during the school closures. और इसमें parents का भी बहुत concern होगा because, you know, it's a challenge for them also to handle, you know, their children at home. So वो आप थोड़ा सा अगर उस पे मुझे बताएंगी कि आपने how did you manage that, and how did you also manage the parents at home, because that's also part of what you do.
Yes, I would like to give you a quick and brief ride over this COVID thing, but I really appreciate Richard's work is amazing. I did Pakistan Sign Language for, I learned it for autistic children. Then I learned British Sign Language, but the best language that worked is Makaton. Makaton signs are just come naturally with, and maybe at some time I would like to introduce those to you, but that's amazing for autism. So I am really impressed by the kind of work you did. Now, this ride of the COVID for autism, again, Mehreen, thank you for mentioning schedules, because our children thrive on predictability. So the first thing that stuck us was school closed for unpredictable time. We don't know what's going to happen. So before anybody started online sessions, we closed the school on 13th March. And the last week of March, we started online sessions. We trained our staff. And we took the challenges in baby steps. First thing we decided, and we took parents in the loop, we're going to give them predictability. So the time we decide, every day at that time, the children are going to be online. So Zoom came in so handy at that time. We gave training to our staff. It was a tough ride. But the most interesting thing is that there are certain children who took us by surprise. With autism, usually there are comorbid problems like attention deficit disorder, epilepsy. Now, children who have epilepsy are going to find it very difficult to sit in front of a screen. So there we took parental support, and we used sound only. And then music. Now, there are 3-4 classes that turned out to be amazing. This one child who had difficulty in focusing found that his school is available on a small tablet. His focus improved tremendously. He's one of our amazing success stories. A 2-hour online session without a single movement, and that child would not sit in school. We would run around and teach him, and we would take him outside. So this predictability that we worked on was the best part that helped us float through COVID. We supported parents. Again, we couldn't support them that much. We are a trust. We have all kinds of parents, ones who are affording and ones who can't afford. So what we did was that those who could not afford a laptop, we accommodated them by changing ourselves and using WhatsApp videos. and giving them worksheets, providing them with materials which they could use. So predictability we did not take away. And now that we are starting school again, we're using hybrid system because we are not too sure when it closes down again. So for us, it was a learning curve too, that sometimes we underestimate these children. Their abilities can be amazing. Some of them just could not stand that their teacher is not in the building, but on a phone. So we use the emotional regulation program that we use. And we just focused like for mainstream education and for children who are hearing impaired. They are using the main subjects like math, science, English. We used emotional regulation and we used music. Music at this part turned out to be amazing. It helped us so much. So COVID challenges is that don't give up. Find another path. That's what we've learned. That's anything and everything can be possible. You have to step forward and things will change. So coming back to how the working hours lessened, then some parents took their children abroad. So for our teachers, I am amazed at that team. It was like a 24-hour work. Some children who used to sleep till late, we accommodated them in the evenings. So timings became fluid for us, but we accommodated the children.
Incredible, incredible. Thank you so much. इसके साथ ही एक और सवाल है, अब आप लर्निंग आउटकम्स को देखते हैं या आपने जो टारगेट्स बनाए होते हैं समरीना, आप उनको देखते हैं, क्या बच्चों ने रिग्रेस किया इस टाइम में या उनका लेवल वही रहा? और आपने थोड़ा सा अपनी स्टाफ का बताया है कि उनके टाइम सारे ऑल मिक्स्ड अप थे, तो थोड़ा सा उनकी डेडिकेशन के बारे में, you know, just tell me a little bit about the learning losses as well.
The thing is, Mehreen, that we had problems with children who could not take online sessions because of some problem at home.
Right.
So those children regressed, but then again, when we had training sessions with parents online, because otherwise also we train parents, we call them to school, we have sessions, we have all kinds of trainings. So what we did was we trained them that if you use Zoom and if you are unable to make your child sit in front of a screen, because it became a very big challenge for the parent also. You know, those 5 hours, the child is with us, the parent has, because I'm sure all these people with special needs, I feel the stress level, especially in a Pakistani family where there is chachi, mami, tai telling you, oh, you're doing everything wrong, then there is the pressure on the parent, which is like the pressure on a commando. The stress level is so high. So what we did was we emailed them all the work. So parents cooperated by printing it and doing it. And our teachers had worked, those who survived. Some of them could not survive COVID because they found it very difficult to work online. But those who survived has turned out to be beautiful butterflies, committed and immaculately working. I mean, I wish I had time to share videos with people who would be amazed to see an autistic child who they have peripheral vision and they would not look at you, but look at the screen, focus, and talk to you. And our Makaton sign language came in very handy. And then again, because they use visuals and we had visuals available for them all the time because of the screen, it took us a time to understand that how screen sharing can help, because we don't have control over drawing something. So screen sharing helped a lot. Technology turned out to be amazing at this time.
So आप Makaton की बात कर रही हैं, sorry मैं काट रही हूँ आपको. Makaton ये क्या है? इसका तो थोड़ा बताइए.
Makaton is a British developed program. It's a sign and symbol language. What helps mostly with autism is the visual symbols. For every word, there is a symbol, because for these children, every word is an image. They are children who think, there's a very famous autistic living legend called, who's written a book called Thinking in Pictures. So she used to say, if I have to think of somebody who's angry or happy, I think of that picture of my mother smiling and I know what happiness is. But the word happiness in itself means nothing. So when it comes to visually looking at an image, Makaton symbols help us teach our children to read. So the challenge becomes much easier. It's a beautifully developed program and it gives you the flexibility to customize it according to your culture. So we use certain words, like if a child is so used to saying, you know, being bilingual, we have to be very flexible. अब वो आलू कहता है, potato नहीं समझता, तो हम आलू इंग्लिश में लिख के उसका सिंबल लगा देते हैं.
हाँ, so, मीशा अनवर ने कुछ आपके लिए नाम भी लिखा है in the chat. So
okay.
I
Temple Grandin.
Yes, we have a very initiated audience, mashallah. That's great.
Temple Grandin. I wasn't able to remember Temple Grandin. She's a living
Again, Dr. Bari and Misha both have mentioned that. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for participating, audience. Very kind of you. Acha, Samrina, एक आपका project था जो at least I was extremely impressed and there was a lot of traction. Art का project था जिसमें हमारे LUMS के students भी गए थे. A lot of other people were also there. And it was quite fascinating, that project and the way it was presented. So just talk a little bit about that project and also tell me, did you get understanding of a student's mind while they were painting and during their art projects? So iska thoda sa mujhe bataiye.
Thank you so much, Mehreen, and I really like it when you appreciate it every time. It is these 10 years that we spent working with these children that we realized that speech therapy, conventional methods, we have to think outside the box. So art became a therapy for us to assist speech therapy. So every child communicated through his medium of art, the medium that he selected out of choice. So over the period of 10 years, their signature style we marked. We collected more than 400 paintings, and we actually, yes, came to know how their child's mind works. So the Archicreative Initiative Director, a young artist who's no longer that young because he's been working with us for 11 years, but he had an amazing insight, a very natural person with these children, amazing insight with these children. So what we did was that art program gave us a chance to call all those people, artists, mature artists, who would refuse to believe that a 6-year-old could do this work, or an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old. And I have a very small presentation, which I'll request Ali to share with you people, just to give you an insight that through their artwork, they communicated with us. And we made them learn more and more words. So we called that artwork, if we can go back to the first presentation, Ali, to the first image, that is, we call it Mapping the Genius. Now, the painting that you can see behind it is a 6-year-old child using both his hands and painting, and he chooses his own colors. This whole artwork is child directed. There is no intervention by anyone. So we mapped their genius, their mindset, and what they are trying to tell us, and they communicate with us. They would surprise you by naming a color, wouldn't say another word after that, but the art room is where they speak, and that is how we teach them to speak then, from a sound to a word, from a word to a phrase, and from a phrase to a sentence. The next image, please. Now, this is a work by one child, and he works from memory. Now, he goes to a village, he draws a tractor, and then he associates the sound, the movement of the tractor, and people were amazed to see his work. This is not done in one sitting. Every time he knew what his signature style is. And we called this the art from the periphery, because as Dr. Malik said, marginalization is a reality, is an extreme reality. I mean, we had a parent who came over and said, "Ye line tumhari nahi, aapko kya samajh aa raha hai?" But there was a speech therapist visiting us from UK. She took this artwork, she displayed it in her clinic, and she called people and asked them, there's an artwork by a 40-year-old and there's an artwork by a 12-year-old. Everybody pointed out at this work for a 40-year-old. This is such a mature artwork. So we can show you the next. This is one child. The next one, please. This is a girl who is very sensitive and draws and tells us there are these 3 people. She had a younger brother, and then she makes just 2. She says when the younger brother became important, she disappeared. It's amazing how she tells what she feels through her art stories. She speaks, we write, and she draws and explains it all. So we are soon going to print a storybook done by her, and we are also in the process of printing an adult art and activity book, coloring book, which is devised by one of our students. Please, can we have the next one? This is one of our very star students who wants to become a chef. And thank you, Dr. Bari. He writes his recipes, he makes a painting, and then he writes. And his recipes are amazing work. So his expression is not just his artwork. Over the years, he's learned to write. He's learned to pick out words, and very, very different. Like he's talking about a sugar cake, a red sugar cake. and he names every work that he does. So this is over the years that he's done this work. So his mind thinks in the same pattern. We've mapped his genius and we know how he's going to communicate. So it's an amazing way of communication. And we want to use this artwork, please next, to give them vocation. Now this child has no speech, but he selects his colors and drips his paint and expresses what he feels. And sometimes it's how we read it, how we deconstruct it, how we understand it, that there is something, some shadow, black shadow somewhere, which is disturbing. Otherwise, there's quite a peace and tranquil in his life, but there's something that bothers him. Next, please. This is an amazing story. Now, when Arham was 11 years old when he made these paintings. There is a eucalyptus tree in Australia, and it is called the rainbow eucalyptus. The bark looks exactly like this. The child has never been out of Pakistan. How strange a human brain can be. This mystery is for us to solve. These are geniuses. And if we take away autism, that's what Temple Grandin says, if we take away autism, we take away the genius from the world. So look at this. He's never seen that tree, but he's drawing and painting this bark at different timings, using different shades, and look at the pastels, their pattern. This is how we map this genius. Next, please. Now, I was talking about an adult activity book and drawings. This child is fascinated by animals. This is his paintings with colors, but he makes sketches with pen and pencil, which can be colored, and they are all animals. He is so fascinated by animals. When we print his book, inshallah, of course, because we are partners with SOC, we are going to show them and share it with you also. But you just cannot imagine what brilliant child this is.
This is great work. This is truly great work, Samrina. Wonderful. Please go on. Please go
Next,
on.
please. Now, again, the pattern that I just showed you for the eucalyptus rainbow, this is the same child. Before he made the rainbow tree, he made these little blobs. Now, these colors are so clear, and some will drip, some will not drip. It's not by chance, it's by choice. It's what he's thinking at that time, what he's expressing at that time. His mood, when it's not upset there, you'll hardly find a black color. And nobody directs them towards the color. The palette is presented to them. And sometimes they even go to the cupboard and select their own choice. And Mehreen has seen the art room. It actually looks like an art room, completely messy. And they have the liberty to do whatever they want, wherever they want.
Thank you. This is so wonderful.
There's one more, I think. There's one more image.
Sorry. My apologies.
Now, this pillar is covered by this little girl's work. And she's done this work again over over a period of years. She has comorbid dyspraxia. Her speech is not clear, but she wants to express herself through her work. And she is so precise in her work and prefers black background. Now, this is not a black chart paper or a black canvas. She prepares the black. And then she paints on it. It's an amazing work. It's a world of its own. The more you explore, the more you learn. Next, please. Are we done? So we have another. Yes. Thank you so much. I mean, I can endlessly talk about their efforts and the expression.
And we can endlessly listen to it. It's riveting and it's extremely interesting. थोड़ा सा मैं दूसरे speakers को अंदर लाना चाहूँगी जल्दी से because we're short of time now. Dr. Malik, आपने देखा कितनी कमाल की presentation थी. तो मैं थोड़ा सा, if I can just change the tone a little bit, is there any discourse happening around COVID-19 and special education internationally or in Pakistan? Can we link that conversation with what's happening in Pakistan, Dr. Malik? आप तो researcher हैं, so I thought I'd just ask you this question.
No, No, thank you, Myrene. So exactly as was pointed out, the disruptions, and we know these disruptions very well, that COVID-19 has, my apologies, loud background noise, has caused for all of us, have been in some ways, you can imagine, worse for children with disabilities, and those that are in special schools as well, those that are in mainstream schools also. In one of our studies, one thing we're learning is the unpredictability that Samrina was referring to is a cause for concern for parents of children who don't have some of these additional concerns and challenges and additional support to provide. The mental health issues that we're all sort of learning about and suffering from, and so widespread, in fact, because of the disruption to routines, but also the increase in the burden of work, sort of this sudden take away of or disappearance of a social and protective environment that the school offers has in some ways been more disruptive. UNESCO and UNICEF have been writing extensively about this. The Global Partnership for Education has also been writing about this. I think separate countries are looking at steps that they can take. Organizations and governments and sort of platforms that work together for children with disabilities are talking about the kinds of challenges that are being faced in particular. I think in Pakistan, I have seen some conversation along these lines, but there needs to be a much more in the way that disruption to regular education, if I may use that term, has become almost central to everybody's lives, because all the children are now at home and all the parents are having to engage. The same way I feel we need to sort of make space in the public discourse for challenges that are being faced by children with disabilities and their parents and the schools, in fact. So it was so heartening to see actually all the effort that has gone into continuing education during lockdown. I feel the government's challenge is always quite big, simply because of the numbers and the people that it needs to reach out to. So scale is a very formidable challenge. But one of the things that the policy also identifies is for the special education department, they're not sure how much capacity exists at district level. I think there'll need to be a lot of work that will need to happen very quickly to build that capacity in order to respond to the needs of different districts, actually. At that point, missing data is going to become a problem. If you don't know where these children are, if you don't know who they are, how do you help them? I do think there have been some surveys that have been conducted. There was some efforts made to link, to actually include questions on special needs and difficulties in the regular EMIS. So I hope that those data are available. I hope that the ministries can talk, the school education department and the special education department, if they can talk and sort of deploy. Some of the discourse that's happening is the kind of planning that will need to happen for when the schools reopen. So exactly as the kinds of things that your esteemed panelists are talking about, the government will need to think about. I think very, very compassionately to reach out to parents, to involve them, to understand the challenges that they've gone through, because these are homes where it may be that poverty intersects with disability, very likely. It may be that location and remoteness intersects with disability. So to understand exactly the kinds of things that need to be done, how to support teachers themselves. So even the school education department is having to rethink what they need to do in order to support their teachers. Very similarly, what are the plans for helping the syllabi, helping students do a reduced syllabus, or to make sure that their learning outcomes are not compromised on? How do you make sure that all the books that are now needed or resources that are now needed are there? Another point that I was reading that's part of the international discourse is how do you get health information more accessibly available to parents with children with disabilities, and of course the comorbidity with other sort of issues may complicate what their exposure is to COVID-19. So a lot of these challenges, but the discourse needs to be, I think there need to be more conversation, and exactly practitioners actually need to be at the center of that conversation, because their experience can inform not just the government but also the rest of us. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Rabia. That was, yes, a lot of information. Thank you for that. But it gives us a clearer picture on what's happening at the government front. अब हमारे पास time बिल्कुल थोड़ा रह गया है, बल्कि just a few minutes. So I have my final question from the entire panel. So anybody can be the first one to respond to this. But how would you recommend one, creating visibility? Rabia ने उसका थोड़ा सा elaborate किया, but just your opinion on that. Consciousness and concern in our society. तो एक denial भी है, एक inability to acknowledge भी है. So किस तरह हम वो create कर सकते हैं, और फिर क्या opportunities हम society में create कर सकते हैं for a viable participation of specially abled students. Richard, would you like to go first? And perhaps also talk a little bit about your institutional collaborations, because I know that you have those for specifically for your deaf students.
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. And, I really appreciate Dr. Rabia's remarks. I think from my observations and experience working here in Pakistan, I think the solution to create successful and impactful opportunities for children with disabilities is to create public-private partnerships, because the government can't do it by themselves, the private sector can't do it by themselves. But working together, I think a lot can get done. And just a brief example, we've collaborated both with the Sindh government and Punjab government, where they've given us underutilized buildings, which we've then been able to renovate and turn into very functional quality schools for children. And we have 3 of these in Sindh and 1 in Lahore that recently opened in Township, our Lahore Deaf Reach campus there. And we had then the buy-in of some of the local corporate partners who were able to fund the setup. So this sort of triumvirate, if you will, where government and the nonprofits who perhaps have the expertise, like, for example, the program I shared, I'm so excited about it because I've seen the impact and the results. I would love to partner with the government to scale this. I can't do that on my own. I don't have the bandwidth, even if we got, whereas partnering with government who's already, especially in the Punjab, they've got a much more advanced program for children with disabilities than some of the other provinces. So I think there's a lot of scope there. I think we need to create those type of partnerships and collaborations in order to create greater scale, greater awareness, and the correct information, because people are so misinformed. They have so many misconceptions about, and you touched on that in the very beginning, about even the correct terminologies and what does it mean to have a child with a disability, et cetera. So everybody here in this forum, and I know many others, are doing amazing work, but they're kind of in a silo, and somewhere we need to bring this together, I think, because that would be a model, not only that has impact here in Pakistan, but I think it's a model for other geographical areas that could also work very well.
Thank you so much, Richard. I will have to get in one audience question, please. I know that we have 2 minutes above our required time, but this question, again, anybody in the panel can take this. What do you think is the most difficult aspect of your job? Who'd like to take this question?
I would like to take this.
All right.
I think creating awareness, that is the most difficult task, where people come and say, "Theek kab hoga?" The theek aspect is the most painful one. And I would take this 1 minute that I appreciate what Dr. Rabia Malik has said, what Richard Gary has said. They are so right. They've hit the nail. There are no statistics. I struggled day, night, and left, right, center to get at least some statistics about autism. There's nothing. So if we can work together, but we did, every ripple matters. We did a teacher training program for Punjab government. And the teachers were so good. They were very, very, prompt learners. So I hope they made a difference in somebody's life. But the toughest part is creating awareness. And here I would like to suggest something to SOE. I would like them to create a very small, minor course on awareness on special needs and especially autism. So when their practical students step into corporate world and practical world, they can recognize these children and not misjudge them. They can understand that they are different, but differently abled children.
Yes,
So we all
absolutely.
have to join hands. It cannot be one person. It cannot be just government. It cannot be private sector. We all have to do it. We all have to take a share of the responsibility.
Sure. Thank you so much, Samrina.
Thank
If I could kindly request Dr. Bari for some final remarks for this session, since we are out of time now. And also, if you could, Dr. Bari, speak a little bit, since we're running out of time, about inclusive education and your research experience.
Thank you very much, Marine. So forget my research experience for nothing compared to what has been presented and how it has been presented here by both the researchers as well as those who are providing services in the field right now. I think what I do want to say though is, I mean, I don't know if there's another word other than inspiring, just listening to the work that is being done, but also the scale at which we need to go, that humbles as well, because the efforts that everyone is making are tremendous. But what Richard also said, somehow we need to connect and do a much bigger job. On that point particularly, I do want to say two things. One, SOE is working on introducing a minor in our undergrad area on inclusive education. We do have some courses at the graduate level also, but we are working on a minor, hopefully. A little bit of time. Academics take a bit of time to do things, so a bit of time and we'll get there. This is definitely an area of interest for a number of our faculty members and for students also. The second thing, if there is anything SOE can do to amplify the voice, to organize, articulate, to provide the platform on which this can be done, etc., we would be more than happy, in fact, thrilled if we can join hands somehow and take the awareness side of it also forward. I think that that is much better than talking about my research, etc., if that's okay.
Thank you, Dr. Bari. Thank you for your final words. But Richard, Samrina, and Nabila, this is a good time to take Dr. Bari's word for it and get in touch with him, and so that we can rope in our LUM student to help you and facilitate you in doing the good work that you're doing. So thank you, panelists. Most interesting and informative discourse, and for candidly sharing your personal experiences with us. We're really grateful. We're really humbled. Thank you, audience, for taking time out to be part of this session. And since we're out of time, we need to end this webinar. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
it was a pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.